to do executive functions, have collaboration, and share it. All right. Maximizing students' highest functions, the executive functions. We've been discussing them over the past 2 days, and this is another area like neuroplasticity, like the areas that I saw in your survey that I've gotten to speak with you about, where you have different levels of expertise and background knowledge. So once again, consider this an opportunity to build your background knowledge on executive functions and see how neuroplasticity relates to them, and to see how it would be helpful, that my way of demonstrating it would be a way you can modify or use to demonstrate what they are and how to build them to others, to students, to parents, to colleagues. So here we go. What brain powers do students need today and tomorrow? And once again, probably very familiar with it, but let me show you where the neuroscience links in to what the brain needs to do, because there is an amazing disconnect in what the brain can no longer do that it has to do. Okay, the students seem to have more difficulty now being organized, complying with all instructions, planning long term, checking work for mistakes, keeping their notebooks, lockers, and backpacks organized. Do they seem more scattered? Is ADHD more frequent? Are students lazier, more rebellious, undisciplined? Or can their executive functions no longer meet today's demands? And if so, what can you do about it? Here's my proposal hypothesis. Born after 2000, and we'll go more into what are the executive functions by my definition, but let's just look at what the demands are on the brain. We don't have to call them executive functions, but what are the demands on kids born after 2000? And why do I say the brains that were just fine for kids when we were in school and until then, they were able to handle things. They had some scattered and some problems with planning organization, but they weren't all seeing counselors and taking Adderall. Born after 2000, much more information. It's the information age. And with more technology, and the rate of information growth continues to accelerate. So surging amounts of information, globalization then makes it very accessible. And you can just look at an AP textbook and see it gets bigger, bigger, bigger. And as information is generated, there's often the mandates to put it in a book or teach it and test it. Never before has there been such a load on them. In addition, in an executive function such as goal, being able to delay gratification for long-term goal, that's just building up until the mid-20s. And yet, there never has there been such compelling and convenient and accessible, interesting, much more interesting, fun games and social opportunities as there is now. And you know, the idea of people saying, oh, well, we monitor our kids' internet use, or it's in the living room, or teachers, you know, in the lab going around. But that's temporary, because internet access, if it's not in watches, it'll be in contact lenses or barrettes. I mean, you're not going to be able to know who's surfing the internet. And it's very compelling. Their brains are programmed for new and novel and interesting, and that's a demand that they didn't have before. So executive functions needed for this globalized and digital world are unique, because there's so much more information. Not only is there more information, but it keeps changing. The things that are learned change during the course of their education and even after, like Pluto. When I went to school, it was a big deal. Memorize your 9 planets every year, and they had us memorize the moons. It was so long ago, I think there were a total of 3 moons, so that wasn't too hard. But in all those years, I never learned what is a planet, what is planetness. So when Pluto was taken off the list, I had no idea why. I was kind of bummed out, and it didn't seem fair. If I would have learned planetness, I could have understood the fact. I would even now be able to predict who's next, or as science astronomers are now indicating, there might be two new ones that qualify. But that was an executive function that I needed. I needed to understand information so I could accept it, understand changes. So the executive functions gap is that these neural networks growing in the brain, last part of the brain to mature and get really functional in terms of communicating down to the rest of the brain, they're the last part of the brain to go through maturation, to get their full efficiency, to have those ollies make the myelin strong and prune away the excess. And that's still going on until the mid-20s. And yet the demands for executive function are higher and younger. They have to be prepared when they leave with executive functions, because as we know, it's not what you know, it's what you can do with what you know. And we don't know what problems to prepare them for, because they're not here yet. They have to be prepared for changes in facts. It is said, I don't have the reference anymore, and so I'm saying this is just hearsay, but it's along the lines of reasonable. Changes in facts. It is said that facts that a child learns who is in kindergarten now, that 50% of them will still be valid when they graduate high school. So I don't know about the number, but it's certainly going in that direction. Facts are changing, better technology, more globalization, better ways of evaluating data. And certainly the skill sets employers are seeking now have changed vastly from what they were looking for previously. In neurology, for over 80 years, checking somebody's executive functions was part of a routine neurology exam. You come in, you have a numb leg, but you still are checked for your neurologic systems, and it was called to check their prefrontal cortex. You would ask certain questions that would evaluate their judgment, their risk assessment, their ability to top-down remember things. You'd say things like similarities. What's the difference between a duck and a boat? Or what would you do if you found a letter in the street with an address and a stamp on it? And depending on their answer, it would give you a sense of their executive functions. There are more questions, but in neurology, when this was developed, there are the networks in the prefrontal cortex that all work together to achieve goals. But that's not going to be really exciting to teach someone about executive functions. So let's see what an executive CEO needs to do for 21st century success using cat and dog, but this time in a different way. Raise your hand if you have a cat. One cat? Oh, well, I'll apologize and make now and make amends later in a few minutes. Raise your hand if you have a dog. Okay, good. All right, I have both, but here's an example of teaching what executive functions are and helping build one at the same time. We're going to have a cat and a dog videos of a cat and a dog that are biased. But these two biased videos, I'm asking you to use your reasoning, inductive reasoning with these videos to construct an understanding of some of the components of executive function. And therefore, I'm going to have a list. This will prompt your thinking about it. As you watch these videos, identify which list of characteristics best represents the elements of dogness as presented in this biased video, and which best represents the elements of catness, not Hunger Games, meow cat. So I'm still in 7th grade here. So, okay, so here you go with catness, dogness. A little more biased, a little more accurate. But I'll do for you what media is not definitely doing for all students today. I will tell you that those photos are biased, but when we get to critical analysis, they aren't told what's biased in media. Anyway, photos are biased. Numbers are not. The prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain where those executive function networks are developing and becoming stronger as years go by into the mid-20s, that part of the brain is only 3% by volume of a cat's brain, 10% in the dog's brain, and biggest percent by volume is in the human brain at 20%. Now, to help you now further decide which is the essence of dogness and catness, and therefore through bias executive functions, let's look at a non-anatomical picture of a cat's brain, where if you look closely, there's the ability to get along with others center and the remorse center. So it's demonstrating bias and judgment and deductive reasoning, and you'll come out with this list that you can see was reflected in the dog video, not the cat video. But learners would come away with a memory with humor and dopamine and a correct prediction. It's pretty hard to be wrong at that point, dog or cat, and have something to mentally link some of the executive functions to. Now, the list of executive functions that I use is by no means the only way to go. It's make up your own list. There's no right or wrong. These are the way I put them together. If anybody says they've got the one, there is no one. It's how you think about them, how you categorize them. So they are indeed the skill sets that employers want. They are skill sets that learners need at a younger age and stronger to navigate the requirements of college, career, high school, and elementary school. Attention focus, emotional self-management, organizing, prioritizing, planning, judgment, critical analysis, validity, and cognitive flexibility, open-mindedness, creative problem solving. And we did yesterday talk about top-down executive function for attention and for emotional self-management. Today we'll be visiting the others. But first, from the list, this will be for personal relevance and prior knowledge reheating. From the list of executive functions that will follow, select ones that seem to be problematically limited in your learners. I mean, you're welcome to write all of them, but maybe perhaps the three that are most missing or in intensity that are problematic. And then you can see if you have agreement on them. So it's list is right here. So compare what executive functions you find most problematic. You'd like them to have them all, but which ones are the biggest problems in your learners? So, as I promised, my apologies about cats, because that was an exaggeration. And perhaps cats are evolving larger prefrontal cortexes, because when this cat gets caught barking, and the cat is amazingly barking, he gets caught by a human and he resumes meowing. So, as you see that, maybe you can ponder why. Okay, here comes my 7th grade humor again. Why does a cat resume meowing? My opinion, he doesn't want anyone to know, drum roll please, that he's bowlingual. Right? You thought he was barking in it? Oh, there was we have no idea. So, and the fact that their percentage of their prefrontal cortex is smaller by volume, it's a correlation, but not a causation, cause and effect. It's just a way for me to emphasize a couple of things. One is that size doesn't always matter. The percent by volume, whales' brains by volume are bigger than human brains by volume compared to the body. But yes, these things are just exaggerated, an example of like how you can misrepresent things and also to leave a memory. But I'm glad you asked. All right, let's talk about these executive functions. They need them at a certain level now, that they could get by without them being at that level until this current generation, when the demands on them now no longer fit the available executive functions. So let's start by looking at these neural networks. Children are not born with the executive function skills. They've got all kinds of stuff. They can take in information, make memories, do use reflexes, but the skills of executive function, that's down the line. They are born, though, every child is born with the potential to develop successful executive functions. And the executive function skill sets that they need, to some degree, are developing the precursors of executive functions are developing, and importantly, during the early months and years of life. But the applicable skill sets, the cognitive and applicable knowledge and skill sets in these neural networks are undergoing their most rapid maturation responsiveness during the school years. So as you recall, neuroplasticity is going to come to the rescue of these networks that are needed now, but won't develop for another 10, 15 years in these kids. Recall that repeated activations, more firing, comes to stronger and more connections, wiring. So that's what we want to do for the executive function networks during these school years. The networks in the prefrontal cortex are the last part of the brain to go through this rapid maturation phase during the school years. I think the next slide has something loud. No, after. So in the next slide after this, there'll be a time-lapse photograph of the brain going through maturation from 5 to 18. And pointed where the arrow is where the prefrontal cortex is. It's a weird view, the eyes are down here. But you'll see blue, which represents maturation, an area that's undergone its maturation phase, will be in all the parts of the brain until the last one, prefrontal cortex. Now, what the blue represents, what this maturation phase does, is what we were talking about before, the pruning away of the unused circuits and the adding of myelin, particularly showing up as myelin, and the dendrites, the neuroplastic boosting of the circuits that are used the most. Now, neuroplasticity, I said, happens all the time from birth through death. But the rapid maturation phase, going on in different parts of the brain at different times, and going on last in the prefrontal cortex, gives us an incredible opportunity, because during this rapid maturation phase, the window never closes, but it's like activation gives us twice the myelination and dendrites. That number is not scientific because it's very variable. But imagine if you got the same exercise, body, cardio, from running 1 mile as running 2 miles. During this rapid maturation phase, activation of these circuits is going to give us a significantly greater bang for the buck in terms of myelin and synapses and dendrites. So we can take advantage of that. So the challenge is they need more executive function power during the school years. The intervention is through what we've learned through neuroplasticity, and that this window is especially responsive. And the reason that what blue is showing is the amount of myelin in an area. So what shows up during rapid maturation is more and more blue. All right, so time lapse, age 5 to 18. And it repeats, so you'll see. So knowing that this high response time is going on in these years, and knowing what they need, maybe this will be the loud one, now you've been warned. Educators are the caretakers of the brain's most powerful development, most critical development. You're the brain changers. You are the guides to these neural networks that aren't planned to come strongly online till the mid-20s, but are available to be molded during the school years. Okay, high alert on the next slide. Okay, that wasn't so bad. So the maturation phase, the rapid maturation phase, that blue thing, the executive functions are at their peak responsiveness to the neuroplastic activity, using them and growing more connections. So firing, even more wiring. So you got the point. We want to activate these circuits, especially when they're responsive, because they need these executive functions for the new demands. So we want to embed opportunities to use them throughout the curriculum. We cannot afford the time, and nor would students care for it. All right, it's math, science, social studies. Now it's executive function building time. It's not an add-on. It's not a separate. It's embedded. And you'll find it's like a 2-for-1. By incorporating executive function use into what activity learning experiences that they're going to have, the memories are stronger, there's more mental manipulation, and the circuits are getting more and more developed. We can see students that are having more activation in their executive function. You can see more of the density of white matter on scans, more rapid firing with evoked potentials. So we want them to have the skill sets to do what they need to do at younger and younger ages and to take with them for life. And the cool thing is, activating like having them use judgment, doesn't do a separate judgment network. The executive function network is a collective, and whichever one you're activating, the collective is getting activated. So even if you don't do them all, they're going to get strengthening. Why you need to incorporate them all is for the purpose of helping them learn the skill sets to use when they're using them. But that's what we're going to talk about this afternoon. Care and feeding of executive functions. Remembering that neuroplasticity, we want to activate their executive function circuits during their high response school years by incorporating them throughout and across the curriculum. So, networks are the last, in the prefrontal cortex, the last part of the brain to go through rapid maturation. We know that activation, use, promotes network strengthening through neuroplasticity. And we want to help students strengthen their prefrontal cortex circuits of executive function by incorporating the use of executive function across the curriculum. Exciting. Okay. Let's do we're going to do a cocktail party, right? Where is this? Oh, yeah. Cocktail party, share out. We're not going to do the sit-down synapse, so it's worth. I was thinking you already know this, but no, it's a good one. Because the question is, and I'll put the summary back, no matter what your level of pre-knowledge was of executive functions, something new came in, a way of sharing them, dog or cats, some new information was most likely presented, maybe about cats barking because they're bilingual. So write down a prompt, because you're going to stand up and share it with someone, unless you want to just remember it, but something you want to remember about the development of executive functions, the summary that I'll put up. Then, so you're standing up and move around after lunch, you're going to share it out with one or two people, your choice, cocktail party, tea party style, which means you're up, you have your paper, you say, I want to remember they say to you, I want to remember blank, or I want to share this, and I want to share that. And so, write it down. When you're ready, stand up, share it with someone. And when you're ready, sit down, share it with one or two, and we'll move on to specifically how do we build? Organizing and prioritizing across the curriculum, embedded. With any executive function that you want to build, you don't want to start off with using a sentence such as, all right, we're going to build your organizing skills. That's a turnoff, and you're going to get the fixed mindset, oh, everyone's always told me I'm so disorganized, I'm so scattered, so there's not going to be a whole bunch of buy-in. So I'll give you the examples with this, but keep in mind that anything you want to work on means embedding. You want to show them what they already can do before you even tell them what the term is. So for example, promote awareness of their existing skills. You can maybe use the word organizing or not, but here's an example. Their existing skills. So if one of you want to embed organization, you could just say, how do you sort your music on playlists? You know, whatever you know that they happen to sort or organize, starting with that. Build their metacognition, build their awareness that they do organize. Then model your organizational strategies very carefully. Not, hey, look what I can do, but if it's sincere and they say, do you have information on this? Or where's that file that you said you have for resources? And if it's true, you say something like, if you would have asked me for that last year, I'd say come back in a week because I would have to search. But I finally figured out, and tell them what you figured out. But don't shove it in their face. All right, here's the next kind of step. Ask their opinion about things that they know that are organized, things that they like, care about, or into. For example, what organizational reasoning do you see in the schedule of classes at schools, the schedule of when we have vacations, the play schedules for sports leagues, how award categories are sorted for music? So invite their opinion, where there's no one right answer, something they're interested in, and why do you think it's done that way? And then the real buy-in, how would you improve it? So now they're thinking about it, they have a little skill, a little interest, they have a goal, they can do it better. They always feel they can do it better. So you build their intuitiveness, something like that. Then how can you start building their skills? Keeping in mind that the goal of building an executive function is not giving them a template like the ones I'll show you. It's not, here's an organizing checklist, be sure you do everything on the list, then you'll be organized. That's not going to transfer. That's going to work for this time, this place, this activity. You want to build, as you'll see over and over for the executive functions, their ability to develop their own way of organizing, prioritizing, so when times change and information changes, they can do it. So for example, this looks like I'm giving a checklist, but it's not. Personalizing organizing checklists. Removing items from categories when they become self-sufficient. They're the judge. So there's a website, PBL, Project-Based Learning Checklist, and they are crazy detailed. Here's how I did it. You can do anything you want, but they're for all topics, grade levels, and they're intensely crowded with stuff. This one is for oral presentation checklist. But what I would do with them is get one that's maybe a grade lower than my students, because my goal was to have them right away see things on this organizing checklist that they could do. Then it becomes personalized because so you're selecting a checklist with categories that specify multiple items, including ones students have already mastered. You give these to the students and say to them, all right, first thing, cross out the ones that you already mastered. Because they'll be like, do you have a pencil ready? Yeah. Then you don't tell them to take it home and do everything on it, but periodically you bring it back, the same list that they had, or they keep it, or you keep it. They're probably not organized, so you have to keep it. But you bring it back, and when they've done this type of activity again, they revisit and cross out. It's great if they can look at it periodically, and the more frequently they look at it and cross out, the more frequently they are also seeing the things that they're not doing. You're not drawing attention to it, but because they're seeing if they can cross it out, it's making an impression. Whereas saying, for every paper, do everything on this list, that's the opposite of what we want. We want them to see their progress and also be aware of other useful things. But websites, this particular website, you can modify them, add things, take things away. Other thing, checklist modification. Students remove items from the checklist when they feel they've become self-sufficient. You're not telling them when they're self-sufficient. They are using their metacognition and determining it. So dopamine and growth mindset will grow from their awareness that their skills are progressing, and you won't be giving the feedback, they will. A couple for prioritizing. Prioritizing is a big area. It includes things like planning tasks, the amount of time to be spent on different parts of a task, the order in which to do them. There's the book cover versus the book report cover versus the content, the website cover page versus the content. So there's different things that they need to do, but they need to be able to figure out prioritizing time and amount. Prioritizing also involves distinguishing low relevance details from main details. I mean, reading comprehension test, what is the main sentence in that paragraph? But in this information age, so much data and information, they have to be able to do that, because not everything is as important, and they have to have their criteria. So here are some examples of how to build these skills. Prioritizing the best, the insight from this. You tell them to collect 3 items in a category. It could be print ads, maps, photos, graphs, anything that they're would be exposed to, and bring in, or copy, or take pictures of 3 items in that category that they consider very good. Then, when they have these 3 items, you tell them, without any future plan, you're not giving the whole assignment, all right, good, you found 3 good ones. Now put them in the order of best, second best, and third best. They do it. I mean, they can do it. That's when you say, all right, so you did that. They were all good. You put them in best down. What qualities did you use when you were prioritizing the best? They just did it. Now they're using, they think about how they did it. That's what I mean about building their own skill set that goes with them. So they analyze, they did it, so they know they did it right, and they are now using metacognition that they can carry with them, they can share, but they did it. Prioritizing relevance, again, across the curriculum. It's a good opportunity when they have things like in their books, or that you're showing photos, paintings, stories, movies, instructions. No wrong answer, but instead of just reading it or looking at it, inviting them to have more mental manipulation, more time with it. What do you think was the most important detail? It's not the same as the main point in a paragraph. It's what was the most important, and then why? What made it so? Concise summarizing requires prioritizing. When you wrote a tweet or a haiku, you found the essence. You prioritized which information you felt was the most important, the gist. So those were just a couple, and I'll give you a link to a series that's just coming out now about ways to build all of these more in detail. But just a brief overview. We want to help them recognize their own, what they already have organized, like their playlist. Help them buy into it by having them evaluate and suggest modifications for an existing system of organization, which they're interested in and know about. Inviting them to prioritize relevance, most important detail, in a picture, photograph, leaf. And select 3 items that are good examples, and then identify the qualities they use to prioritize the best. And summarizing concisely, like tweeting the gist. So this is, I think, your last sit-down synapse. Share strategies you use that boost the skill sets of executive functions for organizing, prioritizing. You do it. Now think about, yes, I do give them a chance to plan their book report in steps. I scaffolded it first and see their outline, but then I have them make a schedule. So here's a list of categories, and go ahead and share and get new ones from each other. Okay, let's check on what judgment is, how it manifests, and how to embed it in learning opportunities. Okay, this is for you to think about. You don't have to say it out loud or write it down, but I would like you to mentally make a choice of your opinion. Which do you think there are more of in the English language? 6-letter words in the English language having N as their 5th letter, or the number of 6-letter words in the English language ending in ing. So just make a little prediction. You don't have to tell anybody. Don't have to count anything, but I will invite you to have that prediction. Now it should come to so obviously the answer was having N as their 5th letter, but that's something to get your attention to what will be important the rest of the afternoon. And we talked about earlier when it comes to the brain and patterning and doing things because they're a matter of patterning rather than thinking them through or being creative. Why did you predict ing? Prediction uses existing patterns, categories of prior related knowledge to judge new information. It's a good thing and it's a challenge. With judgment, it becomes more of a challenge. For reading, it's critical. But in your case, you've had much more association of the ing. You've been more aware of it. So given the choice, that's what your brain has the most neuroplasticity of. It was a formal learning experience when you learned prefix suffixes, or it was a pattern that you saw in words when you learned how to read. So that was your existing pattern, and that's why it was your jump to conclusion. And that's what the brain does. It's critical for survival so that every new thing in the environment or interaction or question does not have to be figured out from scratch. But for the executive function of judgment and not jumping to conclusions, that's an important executive function. The brain uses past experiences to predict outcomes, answers, solutions, and neuroplasticity does the rest because it keeps getting this prediction right. Ing is the suffix. Then the circuit gets stronger and stronger. Cow, milk, white. The most frequently activated past experiences are the go-to first responses. So what do we want to help them work on? Not jumping to conclusions or just taking your first response as the only right one. Yeah, it's going to have more myelin, fastest retrieval. But is there something else? So because first reactions may not be best, students need guided opportunities to analyze their own thoughts and first reactions, whether it's for social media or an answer on a test or how to respond behaviorally if somebody pushes them. But they need to have the judgment to go beyond patterns of thinking, biases, and to develop their own judgments, not accept others. They have to be able to recognize bias and unsupported opinions. And that won't come from just accepting it as is. And they need to be able to practice accurate and logical interpretation of new information with their judgment, not the jump to conclusion. So you can show examples like this one. Let's go along with me on it. How do you spell poke? P? Excellent. And how do you spell joke? Right. And what do you call the white of an egg? Again, you've probably even seen it before. It's just patterning. But showing these things like them, how many animals of each species did Moses bring on the ark, or cow, milk, white? These are showing them. It doesn't mean that you're not smart. It means that your brain has patterning. But they need to see and feel that their first response is not always the right or best one. Yeah. Albumin. Albumin. But I would accept any answer other than yolk. Okay. Egg, there you go. All right. Here's an example of embedding the building up of their judgment into planning. Let's say it can be on a topic you're studying in class, and it would depend on your age group of students. Judgment and planning. You take them to the library or have books or journal articles in the classroom. You invite them to select a book or a chapter, an article that they think, that they judge, that they can read and understand in a defined period of time. Again, it depends on age or grade, 15 minutes, 30 minutes. But there's two things you're asking them to judge. Because you're saying read and understand in, let's say it's 15 minutes. The goal is not to pick something so easy and be done, to make it take home, to make it real or accountability for it. You say, once you finish, you just sit there. You can reread it, but you don't get to do anything else. And so their goal is to build the judgment, well, what is the reality for me? How much can I really read and understand in 15 minutes? So it's to use the 15 minutes most effectively, not too little, not too much. So you have them try it, evaluate their understanding however it is appropriate, and then have that metacognition. modify and revise. Did you read it too fast? Did you not take enough time understanding it? Did you finish too quickly and had leftover time? I mean, this is an important judgment opportunity and skill, especially for kids who wait until the last minute to do something or waste a lot of time while they're daydreaming, whatever it is. This is reality and this is real world. When you're on the job, nobody's going to give you an open, oh, sure, take all day to do that. No, it's efficiency. This is judgment that's building efficiency and self-awareness. Of course, to make it work best, you have them try it again on another topic, another day, so that they build progress, that they develop improvement. After the first time, they can discuss what would they do differently the next time. Then you let them try it again. Invite their judgments regarding choices made by book characters, historical figures, politicians, athletes, whoever they're interested in or are studying. Invite their judgment regarding choices. It's definitely easier to have an opinion about somebody else or to criticize their choice or comment on their choice when you know how it came out. That's fine. We're not trying to build their total foresight, but we're inviting them to think what the person did right or wrong or how they would do it differently. That's building judgment, and it's also helping them be aware, in the cases that you might select, of when someone didn't think before they act. Another way to do that is, unfortunately, it's not hard to find, but go through different tweets or Facebook postings or others that you know the person must have regretted it when they looked at it the next day, and invite them to bring in ones that they find. So judgment now, especially first response in social media, is pretty significant. Here's a great one, Tic-Tac Toe. Great way to build judgment. Playing tic-tac-toe, you'll never lose a game if you use judgment. You see the value of considered decision-making, you see the consequence of one's choices, and it illustrates the rewards of thinking ahead. Following that, thinking of all the possible outcomes, consequences of choices, you cannot lose a game. You'll certainly tie, but you won't lose a game. That's very quick feedback for them. Critical analysis will tie with judgment, and then we'll have a snowball fight. Okay, in the next 2 days, humans will create more information than collected in all of history since 2003. Or will they really? You know, why believe it just because I'm up here saying it? So that was, to me, it was I don't want to stand behind that reference, but it certainly represents the speed in which information is accelerating and being put out there. And in this information age, as we see the volumes of information come more and more available and accessible, the percentage of misinformation increases compared to valid information. So there's more misinformation than accurate information, and finding the difference we can't do for them. They'll have to learn that skill set. Information literacy, say fake news, right? And I've chatted with people. I've done work for newspapers, and I've asked people that I respect, is there any accurate newspaper or periodical that is unbiased? Nope. Okay, information literacy needed for validity assessment. Here's one for financial literacy or information literacy. It's a website called Spurious Correlations. This is one of the examples on the website. It's to show that correlation does not equal causation, because the two factors here that are truly data collected, how the divorce rate in Maine per 1,000 people between 2000 and 2009 so strongly correlates with the per capita consumption of margarine. Just because the movements of two variables track each other closely over time doesn't mean that one causes the other. There are other good examples on the website, but you show it to students and they say, my parents must be eating too much margarine, or they're having fights. But big, big, big deal. Correlation does not equal causation. Here's another way to build critical analysis embedded into curriculum. Oh, and back to that one, I would have students bring in examples, give them extra credit, if they bring in examples of graphs and false advertising, like graphs that would show a big difference between home sales in March and April, and they found that it was a bar graph, but it had this little space at the bottom that said, 90% down below. Like they just were showing the tops of these bar graphs. So we're really, if they were down here, they were only this different. But it's legal to cut off just the top as long as you have this little space at the bottom saying bottom 90% omitted. There's a different term for it, but bringing those in. You'll see it, not on this graph. If you have students do timelines for literature, history, the progress in a field of knowledge in science or math, it's nice. They do, timelines and sequencing. It's a good thing for patterns and connecting with the text. But it builds critical analysis if they need to support their choice. And they'll learn to look for support. They just can throw things up there and generally a timeline, and there's no necessarily wrong. But now you're asking them to use critical analysis and write down a quote or the page or the beginning of the sentence that they feel most characterizes or supports the item they select. So it's doing the whole thing, going back to the text, mental manipulation, and realizing that information can be thrown out there, but we're not doing that here. We're supporting it specifically. Okay, this goes back to the topic I brought up earlier. We can't give them rubrics and checklists because information sources will vary and information will vary. So I want them to build their own validity scales. So evaluate fact versus opinion. So for younger students, I would have them watch television commercials, and first time I did was over like winter break, and come in and report to us about a television commercial that they thought was not accurate or valid. And most of the time it was ones like, yes, I got this hair braiding thing, and on the commercial it made it look real easy, I couldn't do it. Or I got this transformer, and in the commercial there was like fire shooting out of them and battlefields, and it just came with this one thing. So they tended to bring up TV commercials where it was misleading. I had other students, or later in the year, bring in a commercial in print that you think is misleading and tell us why. So they have the choice and options of whatever they choose. But okay, why do you think that's misleading? You're building their ability to assess. So, younger kids will say, well, if that wrinkle cream did that much, my mother would have it. Okay, at that age, you get it. Or my father would take this pill. But at least they're thinking of a reason that it's not valid. As they get older, brochures, like when you're in an airport or a train station or go to a new town, they have these stacks of brochures. And you can, they have a bunch of them for different restaurants or tours or boat trips or whale watching. So I would collect a bunch on the same topic from a city and distribute one to each table group of students and invite them to look at it and come up with reasons why they think theirs is the best. If they think it is, why they think it is, or support for why it's the best. And the first group goes, and they start saying why theirs is the best, such as these are ones from San Antonio, like ghost tours. Well, this is the best because it's the only ghost tour in San Antonio that has been voted one of the top ghost tours in America. Also because it says critics' number one choice. The other groups hear that, and that's their aha. I'll tell you what goes on, but their aha is, how can that be? Because ours says, listed as one of the top 5 ghost tours in the South, and most nationally recognized ghost tour in San Antonio through published media and national international television exposure. But wait a minute, how can yours be? Because ours says San Antonio's number 1 ghost tour, and it's the best customer recommendations and highest reviews. And this group number 4, wait a minute, ours says number 1 family tour in San Antonio and number 1 in yearly polls. So what are they getting there? Who's in the poll? Who are the critics? Is it the guy's dog and mother who owns it? What makes that, if they're all saying that, how could they be? Where's the data that supports it? So something like that is eye-opening. And then there's the one I would do for internet sites. This is, again, to build their self-analysis. So it's great if you have enough time for them to visit internet sites on a topic of their choice or interest, but if not, it can be part of internet viewing for research they have to do. So the activity is, tonight or in the library, on the topic, find what you think is a very valid website for it, and one that you think is not supported, not valid. The hard part is what comes next. If you can have them do it at home, it's better than in class, but what they then do, they found these opposing polls of websites. Write down what criteria you think you use. You're not telling them criteria. You know, you have this one that you think is bad. What do you think made it so bad? How could you tell it was fake? Or how could you tell that what made you feel this one was valid? Then in class, first in groups, they share out, and this is the hard part, not to have them tell about their website, but to share out the characteristics. What did you, well, I found it was useful to da-da-da. So they're sharing out what criteria they used for validity or bogus websites. And they find commonalities, and they or hear things that they didn't think that they used, but they then say, yes, you know, I did do that. That made me suspicious when it had all this color and flashing lights and pictures of people on it, celebrities. So then as a group, they discuss it. And as you did with Best Learning, they come up with a group consensus of the ones that they feel are particularly useful. Then I would do a class list. Everything that the group reported out would be written on a paper cardboard class list, what made it seem credible and what made it seem inaccurate. And it would just be there. Students could copy it down, they could use it as they wished, but we would continue to revisit it and revise the class list, or if it works better for you, their personal list as they have more experience with websites. So similar to the way I described when you make a template for classification. Now, maybe you thought skin color was a way to determine the difference between a mammal and a reptile. But as you went on, you saw that it really didn't help define it. So that's what we do with the class list. If we discuss their subsequent experiences, and if the class thinks, yeah, that one really isn't one of our favorites, you can cross it off. So it becomes theirs, and they become more expert at modeling, revising, and making it more successful. So, summary of judgment and critical analysis. We'll be doing, this is the summary, and then we're having a snowball fight, because I'm hot out here. I'm not used to this weather. It's time for a snowball fight. You'll see. All right, so summary. Invite their judgment on book characters, historians, politicians, whoever they have an opinion about, or you know, that's a good time, or if they say, oh, that was bad, that was good, invite their judgment. What would they do differently? Tic-Tac Toe. The website's spurious correlations. Assess validity of advertisements and why they had that opinion. The website analysis, their criteria for validity. Supported timelines, what in the text was the most supportive information. So here's what we'll be doing. Snowball fight. Probably in the room, but it's still a real snowball fight. You're going to, it's like a synapse, it's a prompt, but it's movement and sharing. So the prompt is, how have you or how could you incorporate the building of judgment or critical analysis into your students' learning experiences? Here's how we do it. You'll write it down on a piece of paper and crumple it up. But write it down because someone else will have the opportunity to read it. So make a full sentence or make it clear. Someone else, you'll throw these snowballs at each other on the right count of 3. You'll pick up a snowball, won't be yours. You'll read what that person wrote. You don't have to put your name on it. And you'll have the choice of reading it aloud to the group or not. If you can't read the handwriting or you don't like it or if you don't like to read aloud, that's fine too. So you're going to write them, crumple it up, take 2 minutes or less to make your snowball of how you could or already do incorporate building judgment or critical analysis into learning experiences. I'll know when you're ready, because it may not be 2 minutes, because you'll just hold up your snowball. If you want to and we're still writing, you can make another one. If you write 2, you get to catch 2. Okay. All right, as some finish up, the rest of you form a circle. Use all the space you can. It can be a wobbly circle, but you want to be able to throw it across the room in a circle. You're throwing your snowball. It's a snowball fight. It is a snowball fight. So gather around so that you can be aiming at people. So circle as much as you can. But you're not going to really aim at someone. And it's up to you. Some students, you would have them throw it at each other. I would generally, for maintenance or whatever, have them throw it in the middle. You can throw, but so that's a choice up to you. After you throw it on the count of 3, you go and pick one up. You take it back to your place, and read it to yourself, and you'll decide if you want to share it out. Everyone ready with a snowball? All right, on the count of 1, 2, 3, throw them. Wow, beautiful job. Okay, take one back. Here's one over here if you're missing one. There's a baby one. Anybody not have one? Did anyone not throw one? Anybody see one? Anybody see a snowball? See, it is hot in this city. Okay, well, you get to share with somebody in your group. Someone will think we're litterers, but I saw everyone throw one. Okay, read it. Determine if you are comfortable sharing it out or if it's share out worthy, and then we'll do that share out. And we'll share them out popcorn style. Do you know what that one is? So jump in. Instead of raising your hands, jump in. And it also is building top-down emotional control, judgment, because if someone's already sharing, you know not to talk over them. You reflect. Okay. No, whole group, popcorn style. So you have one you're ready to read, just read it. You hear someone finish, you read yours. I'm not calling on people. It's popcorn style, like popcorn, do it. It's fun, I like it, especially this time of day. You gotta get up, throw things, and pop in. Any others? And let's see about your judgment at this time of day, or whatever, your critical analysis, or your cognitive flexibility. Tricky Colgate created a clever advertising campaign to promote their dental floss. Before I explain to you the main detail of these images, I let you observe 3 of them silently on your own. Pay close attention to each scene. Don't call out, but now that you've had time to quietly observe the images, did you notice these features to show you that expectations influence what we experience, perceive, interpret, predict, and choose? Expectations. Woman had 6 fingers. So what happened? Jumping to conclusions, following thinking that you were, oh, I got it, they had junk in their teeth, and saying, that's it. That's why we're going to have the next topic of cognitive flexibility. It extends beyond the judgment and critical analysis into creativity, sustained, and flexibility. It's to me, the most important executive function for life. So first, any questions or comments on what we've done. Well, let's see something. I want you to look at and count how many red dots there are, and be sure. Okay. Don't call out anything. 5 red dots. Is that good? You did pretty well at it. Maybe got 5 red dots. Did you notice anything unusual? Again, don't call it out, but anything unusual. Was your brain receptive to other things than what you were specifically told to find, like 6 fingers on each hand? Once again, this is it's an example of what we see depends on what we look for. And frequently, in learning experiences in school, what we look for depends on the prompt or the prior way teaching learning has been directed. There's a phenomenon called inattentional blindness that was relevant to the 6 fingers and some of the Colgate. Attention restricted to the designated task, so one fails to notice other things in plain sight. This is going to apply to opportunities, information, creative insights. Students' expectation of a single right solution or interpretation, the outcome is not only inattentional blindness, but cognitive inflexibility, which has profound impact in life. It's a resistance that the brain gets with that habit, resistance to considering more than one solution, answer, or opinion. When there's new or changed information, like Pluto or verbs in different tenses, the brain is not comfortable adapting to that. It also means that it's could rely on past experience, even limited past experience, when there's something unfamiliar. Hence the brain developing things like bias, stereotypes, heuristic beliefs, overgeneralizing based on past experience without cognitive flexibility to see beyond. And it's also going to limit creative innovation because of less cognitive flexibility. So we want to build cognitive flexibility. How do we do it? I'll talk about examples of all of these, but incorporate throughout the curriculum varieties of perspectives, alternative representations, less teacher dispensing of conclusions, more wait time, and reducing mistake fear. So, variety of perspectives. Wait until I do countdown by 5 before you call out if you want to what this is. Anyone? How about, wait till I count to 5. Now, these are things you could take yourself for the class to find them interesting. You can make it something they're studying. For younger kids, you could just take a picture. I didn't want to pretended I was taking pictures of students, but then I'd blow up somebody's eyelash. And when you see it in a big perspective, even the person's eyelash didn't know it was their eyelash. So, perspective. Games for cognitive flexibility. I mentioned this one. This is not. So this is not an egg beater. It's a rewinder for kite string. And as they go in a circle, this is not an egg beater. It is a driller in the sand of 2 holes. So, and on tests of creativity, and I can't remember whose test it is, but it's I think from the 50s. One of the ways that they rate creativity is how many uses can you think of for a brick, and it's quantitatively analyzed that way. So this is not. Multiple ways of sorting. It could be with buttons, tanagrams. Initially, kids will do it maybe by shape or by color and think that's it. When you say, can you do it another way, when they're a certain age, around 3 or so, no, that's the way it is. And gradually, as they get more comfortable, or in class where I have table groups do it, they walk around and see others, that's when it starts hitting that, oh, there is another one. And always having them explain, even though they did it by color, having them think it and say it. and then inviting them whenever you can, what's another way, another solution. Similarly, you're in charge of storing the payload on the spacecraft or the space shuttle. Here's the dimensions, here's the space, here's the products. How would you store them, in what direction? Or you can give them some blocks or shapes to try it with. And then when they finish and they defend it, how's another way? Compare another way. Changing game rules. Put the chess, assign different movements to chess pieces. It's going to be resisted by the brain, but it will build their flexibility. And it could be something less complex than chess. Comparing media accounts of an event or person. For example, you show students a picture of this. Who is it? Pocahontas. Who is this? I don't know, some lady, fancy old lady somewhere. Actually, that's a portrait of Pocahontas done in England when she was there. The other one is a Disney animation of Pocahontas. Oh, alternate representations. They're representations for perspective, cognitive flexibility. Retell a story or an event from history from the point of view of another character. The whale in Moby Dick. Paul Revere's horse. Alternate respect for science. The perspective, when you're studying the circulatory system. Describe an event from a different point of view, like a red blood cell on day 119 of its 120-day life cycle. Oh, I see the spleen up ahead. Am I going to be broken down into hemoglobin and end of my cellular life? Collage art. In collage, components are decoupled from their literal roles. You have stuff in there that's usually somewhere else. And that's going to inspire out-of-the-box thinking, cognitive flexibility. Create conditions for cognitive flexibility to thrive or avoid ones that suffocate it. Wait time. Time for all students to think before any respond. If someone's going to just jump up and call something out, it's going to cut off the flexible thinking that someone else is trying to do. If one way to prevent the calling out during wait time is to, if there's somebody who just can't help themselves, is to say, don't raise your hand or call out until I say the name of a vegetable or a river in South America. That person then blurts out, and students will say, she or he did not say a vegetable or a river in South America. So if they're doing it because they want to let everyone know how smart they are, that's going to change things around, because the smart thing was to wait until a river or vegetable was said. Avoid language that suggests a single correct answer or approach, such as what's the answer, which I know I said many times. Instead, try what's an answer, what's one answer, or share your thoughts about. So, cognitive flexibility, games with changing rules, or another use for an object. Variety of perspectives, from photographs to characters. Multiple interpretations. Creating the conditions for cognitive flexibility by the language we use and wait time. This is one. This came out today, but it's a good source I don't think I put in your handout. It's a product of Nature, the Journals of Nature. It's called NPJ Science of Learning Community. And if you type that into your search engine and then Judy Willis, it'll take you to the one today, which is part 4 of a 5-part series I did for them on building executive function. So it has, it's for educators, and it's got more examples than we just spoke about. Let's see you have, we'll start with the opportunity to do your own individual planning. What am I going to do with what I've learned about executive function, or new things I've learned? How am I going to use that for challenges I have, or apply it in new ways? How your takeaways. And we're starting it early because after you have 10 minutes for writing or thinking, adding to your list of how you're going to take this information about about executive functions, and I'll put up a summary as a takeaway. Then we'll have some sharing if you want, but then we're going to talk about big goals for what you're going to do with all of this stuff, like short-term, long-term. I don't have to give you all the information at once. I'll just take the time and answer questions. For now, how might you go beyond transfer and apply in new ways what we've discussed this afternoon about cognitive flexibility, incorporating it across the curriculum, independently, as a group, writing it down, or talking about it. Your 10 minutes. Again, this is going to be, if you leave now, it's not going to be new information for me, but it's an opportunity for you to set yourself in the video game model with your action plans and goals, such as, what goal do you have that would be a high yield, low effort? For example, something that would be be hard to do and have a readily apparent impact on your students. One of the ones I think is having individual responses, like making predictions on whiteboards, or one of the other ones I like is teaching them about neuroplasticity, and that acting out or zoning out is not because they're bad. But other ones may be evident to you. And the other one would be a longer term, higher effort goal. And when thinking of that, instead of saying, yeah, that would be great if I could make every lesson in the video game model with 16 types of media sources and books, but a longer term, higher effort goal, and then followed by what resources or assistance would you need? Not just taking it on so that you say, yeah, but I couldn't do that. Maybe you'd need more prep periods. I mean, Singapore math is great, but the reason Singapore has such great math and math teachers, not the only reason, is because they have more prep periods than anybody. And if something is shoved into the curriculum, they're allowed to take something out of the curriculum. So you could move to Singapore. That could be the assistance you need. And that's why pay is very high. They get teachers who come from the top third of their college graduating class. In any case, so what assistance would you need, and how would you monitor your success? Because remember when we talked about achievable challenge and dopamine and picking the student where it would be most evident, finding how you'll monitor your success for the longer term goal is what you need to keep going. If you're just waiting for the final outcome to be everything perfect, it's not going to keep your brain getting off the couch.